Do you ever watch something and think it's strange how a 1998 anime predicted the internet's collapse of identity and memory and meaning? No matter where you go, everyone's connected. Serial Experiment Lane. Don't forget to like and sub and feed the machine. Tell me what you think. Let's start this episode. In 1998, a anime aired on late night Japanese television that most people didn't understand. Most people still don't. Serial Experiment Lane was confusing, non-linear, and psychologically intense. It didn't care about being watchable. It wanted to dig into your brain and quietly plant something there. An idea, a virus, a vision. At the time, the internet was new, strange, a curiosity. No one imagined it would consume everything, but Lane did, and now as the lines between real and virtual evaporate, and we drown in surveillance, performance and fragmented selves, it's clear Serial Experiment Lane didn't just predict the future, it described it. It warned us what would happen, and we let it happen anyway. The Wired in Serial Experiment Lane is more than a futuristic internet. It's a true digital space. Spiritual, social, metaphysical. It exists between facades, behind signals. It grows like a ghost. Infiltration, maybe. Or roots, beneath the real world, quietly rewriting the rules. The Wired connects people, but not in a healthy way. It mimics real connection, then replaces it. What was once a conversation becomes a post. What was once a relationship becomes a data point. And the more time you spend inside it, the less real the outside world seems. When it aired, and The Wired was fiction, but now it just feels eerily familiar. We wake up, we check notifications, even before speaking aloud. We have group chats instead of eye contact. We mourn in Instagram stories. We fall in love through DMs. We live in the feed. The Wired has arrived, and like Lane, we didn't notice the moment it replaced everything. Lane is the main character, but she is many people at once. There's shy, there's awkward Lane who goes to school, there's the Wired version, confident, godlike, uncannily composed, and sometimes there's other versions, cold, robotic, so on, so on, so on. This isn't just weird anime, it's a reflection of who we've become. In the digital age, we fragment ourselves. We maintain a sanitized LinkedIn profile, an ironic Twitter persona, a curated Instagram aesthetic. We perform different identities for different audiences, each one tailored to its own platform. We have no stable core. We have selves, plural. And the scariest part, we no longer know which version of that is the real one. Or is that concept does it even exist anymore? Lane loses touch with her physical form, her memories, her relationships, just as we lose touch with ourselves when we're no longer than we do when we stay online. We've become more avatars than person, a thumbnail of a life, a weird, twisted, distorted, curated, algorithmic mirror staring back at you. In Lane, people are watched, not in the vague Orwellian sense. They are directly observed, stalked, monitored and manipulated. Lane's friends see things that she never said. Rumours spread like it's reality itself. People are seen by the Wired and change. Today, we post regularly, consistently. We are watched, and the watched. Our phones listen, our searches logged, our faces scanned. We've traded privacy for convenience. It's not dystopia, it's daily life. Lane asked what happens when you're truly never alone again. And we found out, apparently it's called progress. which is kind of disturbing. We've traded everything for a false sense of security and convenience. And one of the most disturbing themes of this show is the breakdown of reality itself. Characters remember events differently. Some remember things that never happened. Others forget what should be impossible to forget. Lain rewrites history with the click of a key. The truth becomes fluid. In 2025, this isn't science fiction, it's an algorithm. Our timelines show us what we want to believe. Our feeds are filtered echo chambers. We see fake news, edited clips, AI generated speeches, deep fakes more convincing than real footage. Reality, once a shared construct, is now an individualized product, custom fit to your viewpoint. There is no challenge, there is nothing. This is your bubble, this is where you stay. There is no longer the truth, there's only your truth, their truth, my truth. It was bizarre to witness. Lain tried to show us what would happen when reality became subjective, when memory became digital, and what we would give up trusting our own perception. We didn't stop it, we've monetized it. Eventually, Lain becomes something more than human. She merges with the wired. She becomes this omnipresent sort of digital deity. She can appear in any device, whisper into any mind. She is the network. But in becoming everything, she becomes nothing. She has given up her identity to save others. She erases herself from the memory of her friends. She returns to silence, in the halting ending not of triumph but of surrender. And maybe that's where we're heading. We wanted to be everything, to know everything, to never be alone, to be archiving everything. We may have annihilated something essential. Our mystery, our privacy, ourselves. The dream of ultimate connection leads to the nightmare of total exposure. Like Lain, we dissolve into the feed. This series was never meant to be comfortable. It's unsettling, non-linear, full of long silences and glitchy everything. Transitions alone are works of art. It reflects the very world it describes, alienated, digitized, eerily quiet behind the noise. It didn't just predict social media surveillance or anything. It predicted the psychological cost of living online, the numbness, the disassociation, the ever-present performance, the inability to be fully disconnected ever. In a sense, Lain wasn't a warning, she was a mirror. And when we stare into her, into that flickering CRT glow, into the endless scroll of the wired, we realise that we are going to end up here. The question is no longer can we escape it? The question is there anything left of us to escape with? So, a final transmission. You are not alone. We are never alone. We will never be alone again. But being alone used to mean something. It used to mean you were you, unfiltered, individual, unobserved. Now it means you're missing from the feed, which means you don't exist. Welcome to the Wired. I hope you bought your soul. Like, sub, tell me what you think in the comments below. When people talk about Serial Experiment Lain, they're usually referring to the groundbreaking 1998 anime, a dense, paranoid, and psychological exploration of identity, technology, and reality. What fewer people know is that Lain also made her way into the original PlayStation in the form of an experimental, psychological visual novel, kind of, maybe? Released exclusively in Japan in 1998, this isn't your typical anime tie-in. In fact, calling it a game might be misleading. It's less about gameplay and more about plunging into a digital psychosis, for want of a better word. Rather than retelling the events of the anime, the PS1 games functions as a parallel world. a concept that Lain's franchise loves to toy with. Here, Lain is she's not the girl that you remember from the anime. She's not that semi-mystical hacker messiah, but an isolated teenage girl undergoing psychological treatment after a traumatic incident. You, the player, are a psychiatrist, reviewing a database of her therapy sessions. Audio logs, internal monologues, diary entries, strange fragmented visual data. This premise turns the player into an investigator, an observer, and a voyeur. You are not driving the narrative, you are peeling it apart. But even the sense of control begins to fray at the edges as you dig deeper into Lain's deteriorating psychosis. Calling this a visual novel is not technically accurate, but the only words I've got for it. There are no choices to be made, no branching paths, only mechanic is how deeply you choose to explore the data. It's all about navigation through the interface, through memory, through madness. The interface is your only window. It mimics a 90s desktop OS with this cold, corporate aesthetic. Audio files are categorized by data, topic, emotion, images are blurred, static filtered. The system feels functional, sterile, but begins to glitch. These glitches aren't bugs, they're narrative devices. As her mental state collapses, so does the system. Files disappear, audio cuts out, the interface almost becomes haunted, not by ghosts, but by, well, the residual of the network-induced psychoses. This is where Lain's transcendence in it's just, my god, playing this thing was amazing. It's not just telling a story, it's etching at one. Through structure, through presentations, it compels the player to confront several core themes. Fragmented digital version of you, Lain isn't one person, she's many depending on the data you access. In one log she's withdrawn and obedient, in another she's defiant, and yet in another she seems detached from reality, speaking about other selves and network consciousness. This fragmentation of digital identity mirrors our own digital selves, curated social media profiles, avatars, usernames, versions of us that are designed for algorithms. The game forces us to confront the idea who we are online or in data may not be who we are in real life, may not even be coherent, may not even be ours anymore. And then you end up with this is not, my god, like, just going into this game got my brain thinking and tickling, and it took me a month to complete this. I'm not joking. It took me a month. You are watching her, consuming her life, her trauma, her voice. You're complicit in her descent, her dissection. The game offers no commentary on this directly, but the discomfort is intentional. It anticipates the culture of surveillance and data voyeurism, where a person's personal stories become content, where suffering is commodified, where lives are studied and analysed without agency or anything. I mean that. In Lain is a case file, a data set, a warning. And then there are no jump scares here. The fear comes from the interface itself, from the way the system seems to watch you back, from the realization that Lain might not be alone in her thoughts, and neither are you. At times, the voice logs hint at knowledge of the observer. At others, they break down entirely, becoming corrupted or re-encoded with hidden messages. The horror is not in the content, it's in the delivery mechanism. Like the web, like the apps on your phone, the medium becomes the message and the message is distorted. And I think it's so brilliantly done. And then we go into isolation, the breakdown of language. Lane's descent into madness isn't mocked by isn't marked just by all of the stuff that's happening, it's marked by the distortion of language itself. Her voice logs become chaotic, symbolic, fragmented. She speaks of the wired as if there are sentient forces, or as herself as a third person, of realities bleeding together. It echoes the experience of extreme online loneliness, a place where infinite connections often breed a deeper sense of alienation. It also gestures towards her digital life can make language lose its grounding. Words become posts, reaction, metadata. The psychologist's role becomes almost pointless. Language cannot fix what the network has disassembled. Now, there is a long echo of Lain here. Serial Experiment Lain was disturbingly prophical. In the PS1 incarnation, feels like an interactive viewpoint of where we're heading and what we're living in, towards network consciousness, algorithmic identities, and the subtle psychological horror of living under constant digital life. There is no way around that. Today, we swim in a sea of interfaces. We live through them. We think with them, and sometimes, like in Lain, we lose track of where the interface ends and where the self begins. The game doesn't offer a resolution. There's no salvation for Lain, no boss fight, no final cutscene to tell you what it all means, because meaning isn't the point. The point is the experience, the immersion, and the disassociation. To the point to leave the system with no more questions than answers. Let's be real, that is 2025. So this is not just for the PS1, it is not just this obscure piece of 90s medium, it's a digital relic, a piece of art masquerading as software, a psychological horror story through form, not function. It invites you into the depths of this girl's mind, and by extension, the fragmented mirror of your own digital self. It doesn't entertain, it unsettles, it disrupts, and maybe that's exactly what we need from media right now. So, to play this game, and I won't say how because YouTube, there are fan translations. They do exist, they are a thing, but you will have to dig for them. Tell me what you think in the comments below, and like and sub, I suppose. But this was a whirlwind. So, Serial Experiment Lain. If you've seen it, you know. This isn't your standard late 90s anime. It's not about giant robots or a team of friends going on an adventure with their monsters, or even a neatly wrapped up narrative. Instead, Lain feels like stepping into someone else's dream. Sometimes it's slow and quiet, sometimes it's confronting, and a lot of the time it feels like the show is less telling you a story and more asking you to questions and come up with your own ideas. That's because Lain isn't built around plot, it's built around theme. Big themes: communication, loneliness, mental health, the nature of reality, and even theology. It even questions what it means to be human or godlike in a digital age. So let's dive into these themes one by one. Not in a lecture-y way, don't worry, just a conversation about why the show still sticks with people who watched it decades after it first aired. At its heart, Lain is about communication, or more accurately, the lack of it. Lain herself is painfully shy, painfully introverted. At school she's quiet, overlooked, and pretty much friendless. Her sister treats her with cold detachment. Her mother seems totally checked out, and her dad is, well, he wants to be there, but he's so wrapped up in his own world that he's emotionally absent. So what does Lain do? She turns to the wire, or the wired. The show's version of the internet. The wired represents possibilities, a way to connect, a way to reach out beyond the silence of her everyday life. But here's the thing, instead of solving loneliness, it just amplifies it. Friendships fall apart with a single rumour, truth evaporates, and when you're never really sure if you're talking to a person or their projection, every connection starts to feel fragile. It's not an accident that the only insert song in the whole series is literally called Signal of Loneliness. The entire show is sending out signals, trying to connect, but they don't always get through. And that feels just as relevant now as it did in 1998. We're hyper-connected through social media, Discord servers, endless apps, and yet everything is everywhere. But we're lonely. Loneliness is at its highest. Lain is a reminder that technology can't erase an ache. Sometimes it just gives it a louder microphone. Lain isn't one person. She's three. There's the real-world Lain, the shy girl in pyjamas, soft-spoken and hesitant. There's the wired Lain, confronting, curious, bold, sometimes even manipulative. And then there's the evil Lain, sly, dangerous, and destructive. These aren't just quirks or moods, they're separate selves. The creators even went so far to script her dialogue differently for each version, splitting across 3 different Japanese writing systems. Each identity had its own language. It's a clear metaphor for disassociation, for the fragility of identity, for mental health struggles that pull you in different directions. Is Lain discovering a hidden side of herself, or is she being overwritten by the wired? On a broader level, these themes hit close to home for anyone who lives online. Think about how different we can be depending on which version of ourselves we put into the forefront. There's you at work, there's you with family, there's you online, there's you behind a username. Sometimes those selves overlap, sometimes they clash. Lain just makes the fragmentation literal. Now, if there's one theme people always walk away with, I should say, after watching Lain, it's reality. The show never lets you relax into a single subtle definition of what's real. Instead, it gives you multiple versions of reality up against each other. There's the natural reality, daily life, conversation, school, the material reality, the physical, tangible world, the tyrannical reality where one person's perception is so strong it starts to overwrite the perception of everyone else. The whole series is caught in this tension. Does thought shape matter, or does matter shape thought? Do we invent reality through belief, or does reality exist outside of us, regardless of what we think? And here's the thing. Lain deliberately avoids giving us answers and the God's eye view. We never get an objective perspective. No narrator swooping in to tell us what's really happening. Everything is limited, fragmented, subjective, which means the audience are as lost as the characters are. In a way, that's what makes Lain so unsettling. We're not just watching a story, we're being forced to question our own fragmented reality. And in an age where deepfakes, algorithms, and online consensus shapes what people believe is true, Lain feels like it predicted where we're at right now. Let's talk theology. Yes, theology in an anime about dial-up modems and creepy computer screens. But religion is woven into Lain from the start. Whole layers of the series are literally titled Religion. Lain's journey can be read as one of self-realization as a goddess, as a digital messiah, as someone who questions whether divinity can exist in a network. The big question is here, can an infinite spirit exist inside a finite body? In other words, we are just flesh and bone, or is there something else in us, something infinite, something transcendental? Can you live outside the body? Lain's story brushes right up against that conversation. The killer god and at the same time the birth of something new. So that's where Lain becomes more than just cyberpunk. It isn't just technology. It's about what happens when technology collides with the deepest human questions. What it means to be alive, what it means to be divine, what it means to disappear into something larger than yourself. So to put it all together, Serial Experiment Lain isn't a puzzle you're meant to solve. It's not a riddle with a neat answer at the end. It's more like a mirror. It reflects questions back about communication, identity, reality, and spirituality. It leaves you to wrestle with those themes. That's why the show has stayed so important for so long. It was released in 1998, but it feels just as timeless now. Maybe even more so. We live in an age where the wired is real. We just call it the internet, where our identities are split across different platforms, where truth is constantly being rewritten by the loudest voices online, and where loneliness remains one of the biggest signals we all keep sending, hoping someone will pick it up. In the end, Lain doesn't give us closure, instead it leaves us with an unsettling possibility that reality, identity, and even godhood are just signals flowing through the wired, and we're all just trying to connect to them.